Hello and welcome again to the Writer Review. This is Eric Corrupt Writer, and this week we're going to be taking a look back at the 1992 movie titled American Me. Now, American Me is a crime drama, sort of like a Mexican or Latino version of Martin Scorsese's Goodfellas. It's got maybe a little bit of a Scarface thing going for it as well. It's a crime drama that further explores gangster life and prison life in the California area, predominantly in the Latino American community. The running time runs for 2 hours and 6 minutes long. It was directed by Edward James Olmos, and the script was written by Floyd Matrix and Desmond Nakado, and the music is done by Claude Jodet, Dennis Lambert, and the cinematography was by Ronaldo Villalobos, and the editing was done by Richard Candib and Arthur Coburn. And the stars of the movie are Edward James Olmos, William Forsythe, Pepe Serna, and Danny De La Paz. Now, over the past few years, anything that featured Edward James Olmos kind of left me with a bit of mixed feelings about the individual. I mean, there's no doubt that he's a very talented performer, but it's his film choices that kind of gets my goat. But when seeing the movie American Me, knowing that he not only starred but directed the movie, I was actually starting to take him in considerably, knowing that such a talented performer being held back by poor decisions, we surely won't find him being wasted, especially by his own movie. This is loosely based on the life of Mexican mob kingpin Rodolfo Cadena, the founder of Le M. It shouldn't come as a surprise that there was some dramatization, being that, it's a biopic, so it's not a documentary. So, there is going to be some dramatization. There's going to be some exaggeration to the story, but I don't think that should really let anybody down in particular. The movie follows his hard-fought life, and the movie is as simple in the story as it gets. This is the story of how the Mexican mafia group Le M started. Montoya Santana, who was in his younger days was played by Panchito Gomez, later played by Edward James Olmos, is a Chicano youth growing up in the Los Angeles Barrio section, who forms a posse with Mundo, played by Richard Coca in his younger days and later by Pepe Serna, and J.D., played by Steve Wilcox / William Forsythe, and dubbed the group under the moniker La Primera. One day he took a detour through a rival gang's hangout spot, and they break into the diner. The owner, who lives nearby to them, catches them and sends them to juvenile hall. JD gets wounded in this shootout and has to spend the rest of his life with a prosthetic leg, thus being nicknamed Pig Leg, because if you may not know that the JD character was inspired by a real-life person named JD Pegleg Morgan. And this kind of further explains why Rodolfo befriends this Caucasian guy who speaks with a Latino accent and becomes part of their circle. It's because, he felt more at ease with being part of gangsterism rather than, being this carefree, laid-back Caucasian guy. These events lead to the gang going to jail and the formation of La M comes into fruition. To me, I think this film stands out as a personal pet project for Olmos, as he informs his audience about the dangers of joining a gang and the uncomfortable life in prison. And you know, he even went so far as to cast real prisoners from Folsom Prison as extras to prove his point. And of course, this was of course a very, you know, gritty subject for Olmos. It's a very daring experience, as you know, he wasn't eventually too well received after the filming came out. In fact, some of these extras who were actual prisoners who served as consultant to this movie, I've heard it through the grapevine that three crew members who were acting as, I guess, production consultants were shot in the process. And I think the big weakness in this movie is that there's a lot of rape going on. Now, and those rape scenes, 5 out of the 6 were, believe it or not, homosexual rapings. Now, I don't really have a problem with homosexuality. You know, live and let live. But, of course, you know, due to Latinos being more against homosexuality than any other ethnic group, this also caused quite a bit of a stir in the Latino community, especially with this movie American Me. You know, a lot of shit was dumped upon Edward James Olmos once the final product was finished. But I don't think he was actually doing it out of bad intents. In fact, he was only just inspiring his audience that gangster life is not a picnic. It's not a cool thing. It's not a cool thing. And you know, once you're kind of like in this gang, gangsterism is a lifetime commitment. You could try and get yourself out of it, but it still comes back to you no matter how hard you try to escape. I actually am impressed with the choices he brings to this movie. They're actually quite interesting and fascinating. Such examples like the opening settings of his interpretation of the 1940 Zoot Suit riots. And it actually features a bit of a city war between the vicious sailors in the California area as they go around attacking Latinos, especially those who are dressed in zoot suits, because zoot suits represent Latino pride, which led to the friction between Mexican Americans and Caucasian Americans, which is actually what spawned gangster life among Latinos in the California area. I mean, at one time, you know, these Latinos migrated to California, to the United States, you know, for better opportunities in life. Since, you know, Mexico is a third world country, they only just thought they would come to have their piece of the pie, so to speak. And then this whole Zoot Suit Wars was what spawned them into becoming Latino gangs. But it wasn't just Caucasian sailors that they were going for. There was the infamous Black Guerrilla Gang. There was also a pseudo-Nazi group called the Aryan Brotherhood was also after them. So, you know, there really was, you know, a lot of friction amongst these poor Latino settlers in the California area. And you know, it still goes on today, gangsterism. Nothing really has changed much today as it was back then. But, you know, this is something that that one of these days needs to be settled. I mean, you know, let's live and let live, so to speak. I mean, I'm sure it probably will happen one of these days, but until then, you know, gangsterism will always be a big part. And not saying that nothing will ever change, but there's always hope for the future. And I think that's what Edward James Olmos was trying to prove. What I was also fascinated about this movie was the soundtrack, as it featured an eclectic array of classic songs from the 50s, the 60s, the 70s, and there was a lot of great hits, including a few remakes, like Ike and Tina Turner's version of Sly and the Family Stone's Can You Take Me Higher. I also loved Latino American group Los Lobos doing their rendition of Junior Walker's Shotgun. You know, the film is generally like one big flashback which focuses on Santana Montoya's story from his childhood to his years in juvie hall, and then getting promoted to prison life, and then once he comes out he becomes like this big ringleader in the Mexican mafia, to his unfortunate demise where his own gang betrays him and turns against him. Unlike, you know, Scorsese's Goodfellas and Casino, or let alone Francis Ford Coppola's The Godfather series, or Brian De Palma's Scarface, American Me is not going to necessarily come up and bite you for attention, but at the same time it will not annoy you in any way. But what it does is it tells a wonderful story, and you get to really root for Santana all the way. Sure, he is by any means an inspiring hero that we can idolize with. I mean, even when he tries to become a better person, you know, once he finds himself a wife he loves and starts to try to progressively break away from his troubled past, and we just can't ignore the fact that he is a brutal thug. And near the end of the movie, he gets what he deserves. The movie, yes, can get pretty ugly at times. Not Scorsese ugly, but violent enough to keep your attention going. And the scenes that produce a lot of violence are there to serve a purpose. I mean, this is based on actual events with, you know, character names for, I guess, protection from family members. And I think it, like I said, the one big weakness is that there was too much emphasis on rape scenes. And many of them have happened. And most of those rape scenes were homosexual rape scenes. And nothing against homosexuality, but I think rape scenes in particular tend to go on for too long. I'm not for rape. I don't have anything against homosexuals, but I'm not for rape. And I think the rape scenes go on too much, and it's a little over the top at times. And that's where the only main weakness it has here. But it still contributes in keeping with the flow of the story. It's a very authentic and captivating film that has a steady flow about a subject that's, you know, never really mentioned too much in movies. And it's a shame that this movie was badly overlooked at the box office. It was a commercial failure, and I just don't think it deserved to be in that way. And I think if I was to rate this movie, I would give it an 8 out of 10. I highly recommend people to see this movie. It's not a documentary, so you know there's going to be a lot of hyperbole in the scenes, but I don't think it should affect anyone. Of course, the character names are changed around, even though it is based on real people. And it's really good that, you know, Edward James Olmos actually casted prisoners and gangsters in this movie to make it feel more authentic. And, you know, hats off to Edward James Olmos. This is definitely one of his best projects he's done in his career. And, you know, it's just sad this movie is underrated, but there's still time for you to go see it. It's probably on some movie site online. Maybe you might check it out on YouTube. You never know, the full movie might be there. Or, you know, it's still out on DVD, you know, rent it. And, I guess that's all I have to say. I hope you enjoyed my review for this week. Please write back to me. Remember, be kind, be courteous, and I'll be back with another review. So until next time, goodbye everyone.